Interviews with haunting gurus.
Recorded in front of a dead studio audience in Burbank, California. Steve Cotroneo, come on down. You're the next contestant on the Twice as Fright. What's up, Steve?
How's it going, Chris?
Hey, I just saw your recent video, which when this airs, it's not going to be so recent. It will have already been a month past, but looks like you just announced the bad news that you're going dark for Halloween. Is that true?
Yeah, unfortunately, we had to make the tough decision. It's a number of things. Obviously, COVID-19 is on everyone's minds these days, and everyone kind of has to, analyze their own situation and decide what's right for them. But we also had some other things going on, some health issues and different things. But we just felt like for our particular haunt, our attraction, for our neighborhood, and with the state of things going on right now, we just felt like it was the right choice for us. So as much as it kills us and it hurts us.
And not guilting anyone else like me who's planning on doing their haunt this year.
No. And believe me, we are super supportive of everybody and anybody that wants to do their haunt and hopefully do it in a safe way and make good choices and stuff. Because believe me, we still plan on driving around and seeing some cool haunts. We're hoping people do it. But it's a case-by-case situation, right? You have to think about a lot more these days with everything that's going on. So I think depending on what type of haunt, what type of attraction you have, I think some of them are still perfectly fine to do. And again, we really hope people are doing them. Our haunt has some interactive elements. It's a type of attraction that draws people in and kind of demands people to crowd around and get in your face with everything. And we have some active scares and gags and things like that. And so, of course, with what's going on and social distancing that we need to do and being safe, we just thought that it probably wasn't the most responsible type of attraction to run. And also, our haunt is a little difficult for us to deal with every day because we have to actually bring a lot of props in and out every single day for our attraction when we're running it. And we have to set those up, and then we actually have to man them too. We have to be there the entire time that there's guests there so that we can man the different scares and the different things happening. So it's not something we can just set up and then step away from and be inside of our house or even be away from.
What is your day job?
So I am one of the lead sculptors and designers at Walt Disney Imagineering.
Ringer!
When I was 11, I started making little Super 8 stop motion movies. And then when I was 15, I caught this lucky break and started working in an effects shop. And that just kind of launched everything. I worked in that effects shop, became the main artist there for 4.5 years. And then I just jumped out into the industry and did what's called shop hopping, which a lot of effects artists do. You just bounce around to all the different shops in the industry working on different movies. I did that till about 96, 97, so a good 10 years solid of working on movies, doing special effects. And then the industry really changed. CG, animation, computer animation, digital effects really took over everything. Jurassic Park and Terminator 2 was kind of the turning point for that. And so a lot of guys like myself who did practical effects started jumping over into the theme park industry where they still needed practical objects. You still need physical props and characters and scenery and stuff. So I jumped over, started working on Universal's Islands of Adventure, did that for a couple of years as a art production supervisor and a lead sculptor on that project. And then that led right into Imagineering. And so I've been in Imagineering since 97, but I also still did some special effects for movies.
So Disney doesn't have a problem with you taking some like freelance jobs, that type of stuff?
a big company like Disney, like any huge company, especially in the entertainment industry, when there's a lot of work, they crew up, and when there's not a lot of work, they let people go. That's just how it is in the industry. So when you first start at Disney, you're usually brought on as a temp through a temp agency. So while I was I think first 8 years or so, even though you are considered an Imagineer, you're actually through a temp agency. And because of that, it does allow you kind of that freedom to still bounce around onto other projects and everything. Once I became what they consider a permanent employee, which was 15 years ago in 2005, I believe. Once I became an actual permanent employee of Imagineering, of the Disney company, then it's a little different for sure.
Okay, got it. So yeah, the things kind of change. They expect you to be probably laser focused on everything that they're doing, and they don't want you distracted by other foolishness.
I'm sure there's still ways, of course, to run little side businesses and other little ventures that you have. But I think you have to be careful about what you're doing. And sometimes you even have to run it through Disney legal to get approval and stuff like that. So, yeah. So anyway, as far as that goes, I pretty much, I don't do movie work anymore, side projects and stuff like that. I'm pretty much a full-time Imagineer these
Imagineer
days.
And Grimwood Hollow, your side hustle.
Yeah. I mean, I still do a lot of my own art, my own personal art, and just to keep my sanity. Because I'll have to be honest, again, my passion was monsters and horror. And here I am working at this family-friendly company doing cartoon characters all day long. So I've got to get my horror fix all the time. I can only do so many Mickeys and so many cartoon characters and objects and everything, and it makes me insane. So I have to come home and make monsters and scary things and totally get my fix, because that's still my number one love.
As we started this out, we were talking about the fact that you're not doing your haunt this year. So why don't we do the Wayback Machine? We'll go way back. And I did watch some of your, when did you start up? 78 roughly?
Yeah.
Like
that was
that?
probably the first time I did a little Halloween setup on my porch.
I think I was 79. There are so many parallels from watching your videos and doing my homework.
Oh, that's awesome.
I was diving in and I started seeing so many similarities, and I'll point out some as we go along. Things that I found. I'm like, oh my God, I had that. Oh my God, I built that. Almost exact. It's crazy. Anyway, but I did start out right around that time. It was probably about 79 when I did the first porch at my friend's house, because my landlord, because I lived in an apartment, so did he, but my landlord wouldn't have that. His landlord was non-existent, was a slumlord, so they didn't care. So we did the porch on his place.
Nice.
But all right, so you were 78. Talk to me about let's go through the first couple of early years of young little Stevie's sickness and where it all came from.
Yeah, you bet. As you mentioned, I did that video that says, I think the title is Halloween Haunts the Early Years. And I get into it a little bit, but there's a lot more that really kind of inspired me and really kind of got me going in the Halloween scene and decorating and wanting to do haunted attractions and stuff. But like I mentioned, I mean, I grew up watching horror movies and loving Halloween and everything. And for me, honestly, even though I was this little kid watching Exorcist and Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Alien and all these horrible movies that I love, of course, we all love them, but for a little tiny impressionable kid, probably wasn't the best thing. But for me, what I loved in those movies was the art. I really did. As a tiny little kid, I focused on those monsters and those creatures and the blood and the gore and whatever it was. I focused on it and just wanted to know how it was done. It was magic to me. And so that's what really drew me to, monsters and special effects and horror and everything. And of course, Halloween goes hand in hand. And when Halloween came around, it gave me the opportunity to, you know, express that and to jump into it and make some monsters and make some scary things. And, you know, and of course, what kid doesn't love Halloween unless you're messed up, but any normal kid should love Halloween. So anyways, I love Halloween and horror. So, probably late 70s, early 80s, two major things happened that really inspired me to want to not only do more special effects, but also do more haunted attractions. Learn more special effects and learn about special effects and pursue that, but then also pursue haunted attractions. One of them was my cousin Tom started working at Knott's Scary Farm back then. Back in those days, you know, in the early 80s or whatever it was, you were able just to meet your family at the gate and sign them right in, you know? And so as soon as he started working there, I was there all the time, getting signed in by him and going to Knott's Scary Farm. And I mean, I was scared. I was a little kid. Even though I love this stuff, it still kind of scared me and traumatized me, like, you know, like any kid probably would be. But I loved it. I couldn't get enough of it. So there I was running around Knott's Scary Farm, getting chased by the pig ladies and all the crazy zombies and lion-faced monsters, you know, on Ghost Town and stuff. I'd be running through Ghost Town through the fog, and they'd be chasing me, and I'd be screaming, you know, and it was a blast. I loved it, and I was so hooked on Knott's Scary Farm, and also the March of Dimes mazes, and there were a number of mazes that would pop up every year in the Southland around here and stuff, and I was trying to go to every one of those, and so that was a huge influence on me. Also, in my elementary school, which was in Whittier, Mulberry Elementary School, back in those days, they allowed you to do a lot more at Halloween time. We could all come dressed up like whatever we wanted. You could be a bloody monster or anything you can imagine back then. There really wasn't a lot of rules or anything that was off limits. It was just kids having fun and dressing up and make believe and using your creativity and your imagination, you know, and so that's what we did. We showed up at school dressed up like monsters and had a great time. And this is what was super cool. The fifth grade classroom, which was the highest grade at my elementary school, there was, I think, 3 or 4 fifth grade classrooms. All of them actually were allowed to turn their classrooms into little walk-through haunted house mazes. So every single year on Halloween Day, they would get all the kids and do a huge parade, and you would just basically a line of all the kids in the school, and we'd parade in and out of every single classroom and show off our costumes. And then when you got to the fifth grade classrooms, any kids that were brave enough got to parade through the fifth grade classrooms, and they were literally done up like haunted houses. There was, you know, bloody body parts and webs and fog and lighting and kids in costumes popping out at you. And I was just loving it. And so I couldn't wait to get to fifth grade so that I could help out and create those little haunted houses in our classroom. And I remember specifically in my classroom, and I really, again, because I was such a crazy little artist kid and so into it, and my teacher always kind of nurtured that and always supported me with my art, even if it was a little creepy and stuff. She saw that it was, you know, just me being creative and being imaginative, and so she always supported that. And she allowed me just to come up with the whole concept for our classroom. And so, you know, I was just a little kid, and the first thing that popped into my head was like a car wreck scene, and with all these bloody victims everywhere. So that's kind of what we sort of created. We turned our desks into little cars, and then we had people that were like just smashed and bloody and like zombie kids all over the classroom, jumping out and reaching for people and covered in blood. It was ridiculous. And then this was probably the other single most important thing that really inspired me so huge and really pushed me into the effects industry and the haunted attraction industry. I had this friend that was living in Whittier, and there was this guy who lived right across the street from her. And I would go and play at her house. All of our friends would go over there and play at her house. And this guy that lived across the street started setting up this Halloween yard display. And back in the late 70s, I mean, there weren't a lot of people doing that at all, at least where I grew up in Whittier and LA County and stuff. There was maybe a handful of people doing it back then, but it was mostly simple decorations and stuff here and there on houses. You were stoked to see just a red light on someone's porch and some cobwebs was awesome. But this guy was going off. He was doing something that I'd never seen before. He had an entire cemetery fence built with stone columns, zombies everywhere, homemade tombstones, zombie arms stretching out of the grave, animated props. And so when I saw him setting this up, of course, I was over there bugging him every second I could. I mean, he probably got so sick to death of me because I was there watching everything he did, asking him all kinds of questions. I wanted to know, how'd you make this? How'd you make that? How'd you do this? How'd you do that?
Who was this guy? He's a friggin' pioneer.
Oh, he was. You know what? Oh my gosh, I'll have to get back to you on that. It's David something. And I'll tell you, this is kind of a crazy story. That kind of comes full circle. I'll tell you a little more about this in a second. But so I didn't know who this guy was. Some guy named David in Whittier building this crazy yard haunt. And he called it Lawn of the Dead, which how rad and clever was that, especially back then. And he ran this for quite a few years. And I remember he came out with this cut off head. And again, I was like 9 years old, 8 or 9 years old. And I asked him, how did you make this? I was just losing my mind looking at this really cool prop. And so he told me, so we did a head cast on my friend. And then from the head cast, we did a clay pour. Then we took that clay head. Then we made a clay divider wall on it. Then we made a 2-piece plaster mold. And he gets all into the technical things about this, which are going right over my head, right? I mean, I'm sitting there wide-eyed and listening to this guy and just soaking it in, but I don't know what that means. I don't know what a head cast is or a clay pour or a divider wall and plaster molds. I have no idea what this is, but he sat there and took the time to explain every step of how to make a fake cut-off head prop to a stupid little 8-year-old kid. I'm just sitting there like losing my mind, and he had to know that none of this was probably making sense to me, but just the fact that he took the time, every time I was over there, he always took the time to talk to me, to explain how he did everything, and just show me all these amazing props that he made and stuff. And then, I mean, again, I was 8, 9, 10 years old when I was, checking out his yard haunt and stuff. Just 5 years later, when I was 15, now I'm in the effects industry. And the first things I learned working at that effects shop were body casting, head casting, clay pours, 2-piece plaster molds. Everything that guy said to me just came right back. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what that guy was describing to me. And now here it is. I'm learning it and I'm able to do it. And it was so cool how it just, connected and all the pieces fell into place. And it was just really cool. But that guy was a massive inspiration for me. He was there for a couple years in Whittier doing it. Then he moved to La Habra, and he kept going in La Habra for a little while. And then I totally lost track of him. I don't know if he moved somewhere else or what happened to him. But 30 something years later, I'm at Imagineering, right? And I've already been, working at Imagineering for a while. And I was, in the effects industry for many years. And here I am at Imagineering hanging out with one of my buddies there. And a lot of, as you can imagine, a lot of people at Walt Disney Imagineering also had a background in the movie industry. A lot of model makers and makeup effects guys and prop makers and costumers. It's all the same type of work. So a lot of those people like myself who worked in the movie industry ended up bouncing over into the theme park industry, and a lot of them ended up in Imagineering. So anyways, a lot of people that I work with there, we all have this kind of background and we share stories and stuff. And I started talking to this guy one of my buddies at Imagineering, and the conversation, turned into Halloween and all this, and, the haunted attractions I've done. And I kind of told him this same story I'm telling you right now about this guy in Whittier. Well, turns out that my buddy at Imagineering was friends with this guy and worked together with him many years in the film industry on different movies doing effects. And so it was kind of cool because it blew me away that he even knew the guy. And then I was able to get his name and then start trying to do some research on him and everything. Because I didn't even remember his name or anything. But I went online, I found the guy's name. There's actually an article, an old newspaper article, that if you search enough online, you can find this newspaper article about this guy and the haunted attractions he was doing in his yard way back in the 70s and 80s. So again, I apologize, I can't remember his last name right now, but yeah, it was so cool. So those were definitely the main things that really kind of inspired me to get into special effects and then also into the haunted attraction industry for sure.
Talk about how things progressed, how things kind of moved on year to year.
So 78 was literally probably just that headless dummy that I did sitting on the porch. And he had a paper plate next to him it was just a rubber mask that I stuffed and put some blood on to look like it was his cut off head on a plate sitting on a table next to him. And then I think I had a strobe light on him, and it was just very simple, just a little scary Halloween dummy sitting on the porch. And of course, back then when you're really little, when you're only, 6, 7, 8 years old or whatever, you're also still super focused on trick-or-treating, right? So as fun as it is to decorate your house, you don't want to sit there all night with your decorations. You want to go out and get a giant bag full of candy. So back then I was doing a little display and then still taking off with my sister and my friends and getting candy, and you had to trick or treat. That's what Halloween was all about. So it kind of progressed slowly at first because I still wanted to do that, just do a little setup and then still go trick or treating. But I'd say probably about maybe 84, 85 is when I started doing a little bit more elaborate yard display. And I think I even have some photos of the first one or one of the first ones that I did where I got a little bit more elaborate. My mom was working as she'd been a registered nurse my whole life, and she started working in surgery, and she was able to get all of this surgical draping. It wasn't used or anything gross like that, but they had boxes and boxes and boxes of this stuff. And I don't know if she was supposed to be taking it or not, but I was a little kid. I didn't care. All I knew is all of a sudden...
Borrowed quotations?
Yes, borrowed, exactly, from the hospital. All of a sudden, all I knew is I had all of this awesome, basically tarps and gowns and all of this material that I could use to create like a little mini maze, a little haunt in my yard. And I built some really quick makeshift walls out of 1x2s and string and stapled these blue plastic tarps. Everything was this horrible blue color too, because it all came from surgery. So it wasn't like a black color or something that works really well for Halloween, but I didn't care. I was just a kid. I was having a blast, and I just had to make do with what I had back then. So I used the surgical gowns for a lot of the costuming and for the dummies and also for the live actors and stuff. And then used all the surgical draping and tarps for the walls. And then a lot of it was cardboard boxes and stuff. I'd take cardboard boxes and put bloody heads on them and, really simple stuff back then. You got to remember too, back in the early 80s, mid 80s, whatever, there wasn't any internet. We didn't have YouTube and 1,000 awesome tutorials on YouTube. Like today, if you want to make something, you go on YouTube and in 2 seconds, you've got an awesome tutorial that you can learn from and probably figure out how to do it. Back then, there was nothing like that at all. There was a couple VHS tapes from like Michael Burnett Studios. Michael Burnett was a very well-known makeup effects guy back then. He had a couple VHS tapes that showed how to do basic mold making, casting, foam latex, mask making, stuff like that. And then there were some books, a couple books floating around on special effects, and actually a lot of them were magic books too, that showed little magic techniques and stuff. And not a lot though on haunting, on haunted attractions and Halloween displays and things like that. If there were, I sure didn't know about them.
I looked around. I went down to like the bookstores and scoured through. I couldn't find anything. And I didn't dig into the special effect makeup books because I was really looking to just learn how to build props. And that's really what I was trying to get into.
Just like you, I mean, I searched and searched too. Went to libraries, talked to everybody I knew, which wasn't very many people back then that knew anything about this. I was just a kid. The only resources you had back then was the library, or maybe seeing stuff on, TV or on a VHS tape or something. And there was very little information out there about it at all. So yeah, I was really just making stuff up out of anything I could, and trying to copy things I saw in movies and figure it out. So anyway, so I started doing these more elaborate yard displays, like probably around 84, 85. And then I was really having a blast scaring people. So not just setting it up, but always creating some scares in there, whether it's, me in a costume jumping out at somebody, or inanimate type objects that pop out. Even from my very first little yard haunts, I always liked those scares because I feel like those are not as anticipated as, somebody in a costume. So I always loved scares that caught you off guard. And for instance, like I think in one of my first little yard displays, and it's in that video that I put out there, I had just a dummy head that I painted up with a wig on it and like a shirt draped over it. And it was just on a broomstick, and you could hide behind one of the tarp walls. And I had kind of a slit in the tarp wall. And when someone walked by, you just push that little head out on the stick in front of people, and it scared the heck out of them because no one was expecting it. And then I also had, in that same little yard display, I had a dummy that I made, and this one was really cool. Like, this is the one I was so excited about. And all it was this bloody dummy that I made, again, out of surgical scrubs, and put it in a cardboard box. So it was just this little dead body in a box. It had a bloody eyeball hanging out of it. Again, I made it out of a styrofoam dummy head with a wig on it. But I put a broomstick through the box and into the arm of the dummy. And when you're behind the box and you pull down on the broomstick, it makes her arm go up and out in front of her. So people are looking at this thing, expecting it just to be this static, goofy looking dead body prop. And all of a sudden the arm flies up at you, and it floored people. I mean, people flew. It like launched people. And so once you start getting a taste of what it's like to scare people, and you get those reactions from people, oh man, it just gets in your blood. It's so fun. People are having a blast. They're laughing. They're screaming. They're having a good time, and it's just super infectious.
Oh, it's a total like hit of heroin for me. I think we have that. People who have that disposition. I don't know what it is. That one extra chromosome or something where we scare people. We get that exhilaration and that thrill. And it's like, I always say, it's like chasing the dragon. We're constantly chasing the dragon, trying to get that thrill back, like that first really awesome, or first couple of awesome scares that we really, somebody fell back and landed on their ass or something like that. That was really outrageous. That's fantastic. You have like a demon dog in one of your old videos, little dog house. Is that also just a dog head on a stick?
Yeah, that's all it was. That dog head was actually from a movie, and I cannot remember what movie that's from. It was an actual prop, special effects from special effects prop from a film. And gosh, I can't remember what it was right now. Anyways, I had already started at that point. I had already been working at the effects shop for a number of years. So I'm trying to remember, I think that was either 89 or 90 when I did the yard display that had that little demon dog. And so when I was at that effects shop, the guy that I started working for had one of the largest special effects prop collections in the entire United States. He was known worldwide for his prop collection. He had been in magazines and on videos and interviews and stuff, and it was an unbelievable prop collection. He also had a lot of molds for these props. So when I was in his shop working for him, he let me have access to almost anything in there. It was ridiculous. Like in one of my videos, I'm sure you saw, here I am, this little kid with this ridiculous little yard display with black tarp walls and everything. And I have all these actual movie props in my yard that people probably would kill for these days, like collectors and stuff. I mean, I had a real Freddy's glove from Nightmare on Elm Street 2. I had a Carol Ann corpse from Poltergeist 2. I had stuff from Critters and Phantasm and Sam Raimi's Intruder and Monster Squad. I mean, it goes on and on. I had actual props from these movies in my yard. And my yard was just this, still in my opinion, just this very simple kind of rinky-dink Halloween yard display. Still more than most people did back then. But here's this funny little black tarp yard display that had some pretty crazy iconic props in it, you know? So my boss was super cool about that. He'd just be like, yeah, take some props, take them home, decorate your house, go for it. And, you know, we never even thought about, oh my gosh, what if somebody stole this, or, you know, or what if they recognize it and steal it? You know, you just didn't really think about that stuff back then. You just kind of put it on display and people showed up and loved it. And, and it was cool.
It doesn't even seem like it was that long ago, but seriously, like, yeah, and even through the 90s, early 2000s, now people expect, especially if you've been doing a decent yard haunt for, you know, they expect it to be better. But yeah, I had crappy little tombstones, and a couple of things before we, you know, get back to on track. I'm going to sidetrack us for a second or two. There's a couple of things I noticed from your videos that I'm like, oh my God, there's so many similarities between the two of us. One was you have a picture, and by the way, very well documented. I'm surprised how much footage you had from and pictures from those earlier days. I wish I have like a handful of pictures and that's it. But of my old stuff. But there was a hooded mask that had like, not quite a lizard face, but you know what I'm talking about. It's probably one of your first real, like higher quality Halloween masks. It had like a black hood, big teeth. Yep. You know the one I'm talking about? I'm not sure.
It was called Fang Face.
Yeah. I had that. That was my first real mask that I had purchased from, which I just posted this online the other day about the J&S Smoke Shop, which was a smoke shop that would get all really high-end masks in the store like that. Now, when I was a kid, I think I might have paid $40. Like, if I might have paid like $40 or $60 for it when I was a kid. That's back in the late 70s. So that was probably well over $100+ mask in today's money.
Absolutely.
And I had that mask and freaking loved that thing. And I ended up wearing it for a year or two and then ended up putting it on this dummy that I used to drop out of. I'm not going to bore people with the story because I think I talked about this in the last episode, but this dummy I used to drop out of the tree and it would come like straight down out of the trees, and it was on like ropes and pulleys, and you know, and I had the rubber hands on there, and that mask was the one that I had on my body. And the other thing I noticed that you were doing way back is that you were building the bodies out of chicken wire. Now, I didn't think I was being that original at the time, but I had no concept or no frame of how would I build something. So the torso of that creature and the arms, it had like a wooden, like a 2x4 for a spine and some maybe 1x2s for the arm pieces, but it was all just chicken wire arms, chicken wire, you know, torso. So you were doing a lot of that same stuff that I was doing. How did you figure to do the chicken wire bodies? Was it just like kind of common sense to you?
Well, I mean, again, at that point, I'd already been like so into the effects industry and trying to learn so much about it that, and I think even at that point in that video, when I was doing that yard display in 1989 or 90, I'd already now been working in the movie industry for 2 or 3 years, actually professionally doing special effects on movies, big movies and stuff. And so now I was around other creative people and people who had way, way more experience than me. And also I was around a lot more resources and materials and things. So some of it, like, again, in those videos, at that point, now I'm already sculpting custom props, molding them, making them out of latex, doing all kinds of way more advanced special effects type techniques and applying them to my yard displays. But things like that, like just the dummies, that really just came out of necessity, like what was in my dad's garage. That's literally That's literally how it happens, right?
Exactly. Okay, there's a sheet of foam, there's a couple of boards, there's some chicken wire from the fence that we put up.
Exactly.
I guess I'll do something with the chicken wire.
That's right. So I'm using surgical draping from my mom and chicken wire from my dad, and my poor dog had to sacrifice his doghouse, So you use whatever you have. But yeah, I mean, I've actually had a lot of people comment on a lot of the stuff that I was making back then, and you too. A lot of it was ahead of our time. Look at now. There's a prop from Spirit Halloween that is exactly that prop I made with the dog, with the dog head popping out of the doghouse. It's identical. It's just a much more updated version of it, And I was doing that back in 88, 89 and stuff. And a lot of the little gags and the little effects and stuff, I've seen those done now 100 times in people's yards and in professional haunts and stuff. And who knows, like some of it I know I did come up with on my own, but some of it I may have even seen it, Not Scary Farm or something, and been influenced by that and pulled some of their ideas and then kind of turned it into my own thing. But yeah, I mean, people who were doing elaborate yards back in the 70s, 80s and stuff, they really kind of were ahead of their time as far as the haunted attraction industry goes, and especially for home haunters and stuff. There just was not a lot of that happening back then, and you just kind of figured it out. You did what you could.
Yeah, you also had a black toe pincher coffin that was made out of plywood and looked like it was spray painted black, which I did the same exact thing. One of my first coffin was a plywood painted black, and I just had a styrofoam head. I had the bottom you couldn't open. I'd like yours, so you could pop open. I think a zombie or something would pop out of your coffin. I just had I would stand it up in the yard, and it had the top door. I had hinges so you could open the top door. The top door would stay open, and pretty much the only thing in there was just like a styrofoam head that I had spray painted, so it kind of melted and looked gross.
Yeah.
It was so simple and stupid, but what's funny? I was just picking things out as I'm watching your video going, oh my God, I had that. Oh, I had that mask. Oh, I did that too. It was just pretty fun shit. Anyway.
You just brought back crazy memories for me. I hadn't even thought about this in a long time, but you actually said something that made me remember some stuff that I'd completely forgot about when I was doing my haunts back then. Something that I learned completely on accident was spray painting on foam and watching it dissolve it. I remember the first time I went to paint a styrofoam wig head, and I hit it with a can of spray paint, and it just started to eat it away. And at first I was like, oh no, I was so bummed. And then I looked at it, and I'm like, oh my God, that's cool. It looks like this rotten, eaten away, dissolved head now. And then you hit it with some red paint, and now you've got this disgusting, gory, dissolved head. And then I started using it everywhere. I was constantly getting styrofoam wig heads and hitting them with red spray paint and watching them dissolve away. And then I had all these bloody dissolved heads everywhere. And it was kind of like magic. The first time you the first time you see what spray paint does to foam, it was like, oh my gosh. And then you start thinking of all these ideas you can do with it.
Yeah, I didn't know why it did. I just knew that was the effect, right? So
yep, exactly. You can actually see it in one of my videos. I have just a little square cardboard box, and on top of that cardboard box are some little rubber cut off fingers and a styrofoam dummy head. And the styrofoam dummy head is partially eaten away by spray paint. And then I spray painted the whole box, like way oversprayed it with red spray paint so that the spray paint would drip and look all bloody and everything. It was just this gory box. But yeah, gore was always the cheapest, easiest thing to pull off, Yeah.
Once again, just you go with what you have available to you,
right.
And then
Exactly.
you let your mind kind of run wild, and you do the best that you can with what you got. Because I didn't have any money to invest in pretty much anything. It was all scraps and stuff I could find around the house.
And it's funny, like I have these conversations with a lot of people these days. When people come and see our yard display, and they're like, oh my gosh, this stuff's so crazy. What do you do for a living? And I tell them, okay, I work at Imagineering. I used to do effects for movies and everything. And they're excited and, all blown away by it and stuff. And it's great. I love that. I love getting that feedback, of course. And as much as I love that, though, and I love being able to take my experience and my knowledge and the skills that I've learned in this industry, and I love being able to apply that to my yard, to our yard, our haunted attractions and things like that. I gotta say, I still love what comes out of people who don't have those skills and don't have that experience. Sometimes I really find that the coolest, most ingenious and imaginative props, some of the most creative stuff out of there, comes from people who are still just trying to figure it out on their own, because they don't have this set of skills or this experience or anything. So they do kind of like what me and you did when we were first starting out. They go into their garage, they run to Home Depot and buy a bunch of a bunch of supplies. And next thing you know, they're trying to build stuff, and they come up with really cool, unique ways of doing it that I probably would have never thought about. Because I'm just kind of following, what I know how to do now. I'm going to sculpt it, I'm going to mold it, I'm going to cast it, I'm going to paint it, and then I'm going to animate it. And these people are just kind of scratch building these things and figuring out stuff on their own. And they really, I don't know, to me, I almost feel more excited and more blown away by these people who have zero experience and come up with these amazing, props and yard displays than all of the people that are in the industry, kind of like myself. Because Burbank, we're in the San Fernando Valley, and this place is flooded with industry people. And you can cruise around and see tons of amazing, like just unbelievable, beautiful yard displays with some of the craziest props you've ever seen. But you almost kind of expect it, right? You're like, well, duh, we're in the heart of the entertainment industry, and you have all these people that have all this crazy experience that they're bringing to the table and throwing out in their yard. And we love it. We love it. Like, I love all that stuff. But again, I'm so much more impressed by just the average Joe who goes out there and grabs some chicken wire and some styrofoam heads and some PVC pipe and comes up with something really cool and original. That's the stuff that I still love to see the most, I think.
Yeah. There's something like every couple of years somebody does something that everybody copies. Somebody who
Yeah.
kind of figured something out, like the cauldron creep.
Absolutely.
Somebody figured, what Craig Schreiber is the first person that I know that I think he was the originator, that he kind of figured it out. And then everybody, I even finally broke down and did a cauldron creep this year. I went through a couple of years where I did go out and buy some pieces from a few with like Unit 70 and Midnight Studios effects, but I decided I really wanted to dial it back and just kind of moving forward, all homemade stuff for the most part, like anything that I can definitely make. I'm not into sculpting yet. I do some light stuff, but nothing that major. But I'm going to eventually get there.
Cool.
I really would like to get into doing some sculpting and some molding, casting, all that shit. But I haven't done. I know my skill set and I know what I have. I buy a bunch of Smooth On products, and I've used a number of theirs to build bodies. Like I redid my Pumpkin Creep was another kind of one of those things that kind of somebody had done it. I think it was like this guy Rob from Skull and Bone, and then somebody else did their version, and somebody else does another version, and I've done my version, and I've redone my version over. There's certain things that come out that become really kind of big in like the whole home haunt scene, and then everybody, like the flying crank ghost, everybody had to do a flying crank ghost. And, So there's somebody, I'm still waiting because we haven't had anything really that's shaken things up in a couple of years, or something that's one of those type of props that everybody wants to copy and make their own version of. And I'm like, who's going to be that next person? I go, it should be me. I should be that person. I should do something. I got to figure out something a little bit more innovative that is not too not too complicated, but yeah, I just love coming across. I usually come across an idea. I see something that somebody made, and then I go, I think I would like to do. No, I don't want to copy that, but I want to do something using the concept of what they're doing for something else that I've been putting that I've had on the back burner for a while. You literally just stole the words out of my mouth. What I wanted to comment to that, and that's one of the things that we love the most, and we encourage the most. Because, a lot of what people are making in their yards, the concepts have been around forever. A lot of the basic mechanics and the animation. I mean, some of that stuff goes back 100 years or more. A lot of it was, there's so many pioneers for these simple mechanical animations and stuff. You look like at a lot of what Bud Hurlbutt, who was working for Knott's Berry Farm, who came up with so many amazing animations back in the day when they were first doing the log ride and the mine ride and stuff like that. And a lot of those animations are what people have taken and applied to their yard and turned into the Cauldron Creep and turned into the Flying Crank Ghost and stuff like that. Those animations really are nothing new. A lot of them have been around forever. But what we love is when people take the concept and come up with their own design and their own creations based on it, and even maybe take it to the next level. We've seen people do that too, where they take the basic concept, but then add in maybe one more animation or one more little element to it that just kind of takes it to that next level, that next step and stuff. We're guilty of it too. There's ideas that we've borrowed. We did our Cauldron Creep a couple years ago. And again, that was already out there. That was an animation that's been around for a long time, and we just loved it. We thought it was really fun, but we really wanted to come up with our own original character for it. That was what was most important for us. Kind of do a little more of something that hadn't been seen as much. So we came up with this crazy like swamp witch goblin character. And then with the bubbling water in the cauldron and stuff, just to kind of make now that you mentioned that, how the bubbling water effect, what is that? Is that a piece of plexiglass?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. You've seen the guys who have done plexiglass with bones on top, so it looks like there's bones swirling. It's the same kind of thing, but with little plastic half spheres for the bubbles and stuff. And it just spins around. It's connected to the motor and spins around. So, but I hadn't seen that. We hadn't seen that yet. And we just thought, that'd be cool. Just more of a classic bubbling cauldron look. And I don't know. Maybe it had already been out there. We definitely haven't seen it anywhere.
I saw the bones. It looks like a bone stew. Whoever took that take on it.
Ours has a center post that goes down to the middle of the motor that's spinning. So it's kind of up on a clear rod to support it so that it's not the stick itself that's pushing it around. So I guess it probably works a little different. There's different ways of doing it. People have
what kind of motor did you use for it?
Oh, it's just a wiper motor, like what everybody
that's it.
uses.
Just a simple wiper motor.
Yep.
On the one that I had just completed, I do like that effect, but I'm not going to do that this year. I might rework the cauldron next year to do something like that because I really love the look of it. But I'm just going to do the fog.
Yeah.
I bought like this little 4 RPM motor. It's not even a wiper motor. It was like $10 on eBay, or if even it might even have been less than that. And so I bought a couple of these little 4 RPM ones, and it works great. It's a high torque, and I'm just using a bamboo stick, so it's super light.
Yeah,
so I mean, it puts like no weight on the motor, and gives it a very easy, slow, fluid motion. But I did, instead of doing the skeleton, my take on it was I'm looking to get a little bit more Lovecraftian, and cool. I tried to make it more of like an Innsmouth creature, like he's kind of a fish, little fishy reptile kind of a deal. I took a skeleton, coated him with some stuff called scratch. It was material I don't know if I would be a big fan. It was kind of cheap though, and I've used freeform air from Smooth On quite often. So you probably have access to all of these materials on a higher level. Like I just I buy them from Smooth On because. But I've used this stuff called freeform air, but it's a little pricey. So I used this other stuff that was cheaper, but it was more like of a paper pulp based, which putting it out in your yard for a month, not a good idea. But I had coated the whole thing. I knew I was going to coat the whole thing with liquid latex. So I coated the whole thing with latex and then spray painted it up, or painted it up. Airbrushed it a bit. I call him like my Innsmouth creep or whatever, and he's so I just wanted to go slightly different because I didn't want to have another skeleton in my yard. I've got enough skeletons like Bucky's in the yard. I wanted to have something that was a little bit more fits in with my theme,
I'd love to see that character. Are you going to put a video up?
Yeah, I did. I'm going to do a better video. The video didn't come out that great. Once I get it out in the yard, which will be out there, by the time this is aired, it will be out there. But for you, I'll have it out. I'll probably have it out in the yard in a couple of days. And I was just fine tuning the hooking up the fog, and just getting that all set up. I just have to kind of put a little bit more great stuff underneath the cauldron to plant it, to get it to stick in and be level. Now that when I put the tube in from the fog machine, I just have to make a few adjustments. But let's get back. I do this. I want to bunny trail off onto my haunt, but the idea is we have you here for a reason to talk about your haunt.
No. It's great. And please stop me at any time if I get too off track. I absolutely love talking about this stuff, and I'll start babbling on and I'll start segueing to other things because I get excited and remember things. But if you ever need to get me back on track, just do it.
I don't know what that's like. I would never do that myself.
Okay, so backing up, so in the mid '80s is when my yard really started to kind of ramp up a little bit more. I started doing more elaborate displays, and then in '87 was the really big turning point for me. So in '87, that's when I started working at that special effects shop in Whittier. And the first movie I ever worked on was Phantasm 2. I got to help create all of the flying deadly spheres and help out with all the effects for that. It was crazy. It was just like, it was a dream come true. I couldn't even believe this was happening. Here I am. I dreamt about this as a kid, trying to figure out how to learn this stuff and how it was going to happen. And next thing I know, now I'm working in this effect shop. And jumped right into working on Phantasm 2 and a number of other movies. And so immediately, of course, as I started to learn things in that effect shop, then I started to apply those techniques to my yard displays. And you can kind of see the evolution of that in that video that I have on YouTube as I start to make my own masks. The first mask I ever made was actually the year before I started in the effects industry. And we had this really cool shop in Whittier called House of Humor. And I think it was a franchise. I think they had another one in Buena Park near Knott's Berry Farm, if I remember right. Anyways, so House of Humor was a year-round magic and kind of Halloween shop. All they had was magic supplies, magic gags, liquid latex, some effects supplies, and they had every Dawn Post mask and Halloween mask they could get their hands on. You know, it was so awesome. So, and this was open year round. So as you can imagine, I basically lived in there as a little kid, buying latex and buying little, I used to buy a lot of magic jokes, like snapping gum and smoke from your fingertips and all that stuff. I loved it. And that's where I used to buy my Halloween masks, especially off season, because you could go in there in January and buy a Halloween mask. It was awesome. And like you said, they were very expensive back then. So I had to like save up allowance forever and mow a lot of lawns to make enough money to buy my, $40 or $60 Dawn Post mask or something. But that was kind of where I got my very first bottle of liquid latex. And I ran home and I actually had a vacuform plastic wig head that had no features on it. There was no nose, there were no eyes, no chin. It was just this really simple, featureless wig form that was vacuformed. And so I took that and I took some just really cheap clay that I had and I sculpted a little nose, a couple eyebrow ridges, and some lips, because I had no clue how to do this. I just knew that masks were made out of latex. That's all I knew. So I took this latex and I spent hours and hours and hours painting layer after layer after layer of latex on top of this wig head, right over the little clay sculpture I did, until I had enough layers on there. And I would dry it with a hair dryer in between to try to speed it up because I was super impatient and excited and I wanted to get it done. So I was hitting it with a hair dryer, paint another layer on, hit it with a hair dryer. And then I finally finished and peeled it off. And it was supposed to be a leather face mask. I have pictures of it in the video. And that was my first mask I ever made. And I didn't know how it was done, but there it was. And I was so excited about it. I made a little latex mask and I put a wig on it. I stitched it up like Leatherface and painted the eyebrows, and I was so excited. And then literally the next year is when I started in the effects shop. Now I learned about sculpting. I think the biggest moments for me as far as what I learned, like the most important things I ever learned that were just a massive turning point for me and just kind of turned on the biggest light bulb in my head ever, was when I learned that almost everything created starts as a sculpture, and then it's molded, and then it's casted and painted. Once I learned those basic techniques, it was like, oh my God, I can make anything. This is how it's done. I had no idea what molds were and what castings were. I didn't know how masks were made. And this first guy that I worked for showed me all these techniques. And then it was like, that was it. I was off and running. And I spent every second I could in that effects shop working on movies and learning everything. But also every second of my free time at home, I was just doing the effects work, practicing the tricks of the trade, sculpting things out of clay, making plaster molds, casting them out of latex, pouring polyfoam into them, making props. And so in 87, actually, I take that back. Because I started, I think it was October of 87. And I don't think because we were working on a number of movies, Phantasm 2 and a movie called Dr. Caligari's Insane Asylum and a couple other movies. And so I don't even think I did my yard display that year or not as elaborate. I just kind of set up stuff that I had already had because I was so focused on working in this effects shop. And then in 88 was the first year that I really got to kind of apply all of these new techniques that I learned to my yard. And that was kind of the big turning point for my yard displays. That was it. That was like from there on out, I don't even want to buy store-bought stuff. I mean, a few little things, fine, whatever, skulls and different things. I want to make all of my props from scratch if possible. Sculpt them. I want to mold them. I want to cast them and paint them. I want to mold my friends' arms and make body parts, mold their heads and make cut off heads, sculpt tombstones, whatever I can do. I wanted to be able to create an original attraction. That was like what was always so important to me, was now that I know how to make this, I want to make original stuff so that it's always a unique experience for everybody. And now I had these skills, I had these new skills that I could put to use. And so there I was in 87. I actually sculpted my first mask ever, which was, my first full head mask. I had already done a couple, like just front face, simple masks that I sculpted and molded and casted. But in 88, I did my first big 2-piece mold full head mask, which was a killer clown from outer space. I think when I started that, I don't even think the movie had come out yet. I had literally just seen a photo in Fangoria and I loved it. I just fell in love with this clown design. There was one little photo in Fangoria of this crazy clown head that the Kyoto brothers made. And I was already fans of the Kyoto brothers. I'd already been to their shop even with my boss, because my boss was friends with everybody in the effects industry. He knew everyone. So we were always bouncing around to different effect shops and stuff. And anyway, I saw this clown and I lost my mind and I had to sculpt one. So that was my first full head mask that I sculpted. I did a 2-piece mold on it. And I never even fully finished it. I never even put the hair on it and finished it. I just it was so much work and I was running out of time and I was doing so much other things in my yard, other props and things, that I never even fully finished it. So even the photos in the video, it's kind of funny because it doesn't even have hair on it. So yeah, so 87 was when I started in the effects industry. And then 88 was like the first year I really started applying a lot of what I learned in the effects industry to my yard. And by now, 88, I had been doing Halloween displays now for almost 10 years or so at my yard, in my yard for Halloween. And now our house was kind of that go-to house at Halloween time in Whittier. Everyone started knowing there's going to be something cool there. And we started getting, lines down the street, huge crowds of people showing up, tons of kids. There were lines, going a couple houses down the street on the sidewalk. And it was getting pretty wild. 89, I was involved in a couple other Halloween projects. And so I did a display, but it was kind of just the same that I had done the previous year, just a little bit reconfigured. And I added a bunch of new props and masks that I had made throughout the year. But I was actually really focused on still working on movies. I was cranking on movies like crazy. And then we helped out our community center had a fundraiser haunted house that they did called Freddy's Fun House. And they contacted us because we were this local effect shop in Whittier. And they wanted to know if we could turn all of their actors into Freddy Kruegers. So there I was, just 16 years old, cranking on all these little Freddy makeup jobs on all these kids and turning them all into Freddy Krueger for Freddy's Funhouse. That took up a lot of my time. And then the other really cool thing we did, my boss at the time, like I mentioned, he had one of the largest, most amazing special effects prop collections really in the world. He decided to put them all on display in a museum. So right by the effects shop I was working at, we rented a little storefront and we opened up a special effects horror museum for the entire month of October, where you could show up, you pay, I don't remember what it was, $5 to get in or something. And we created a whole kind of maze through the storefront that went by all of these displays of actual iconic movie props from so many movies. I mean, we had things from Ghostbusters and Nightmare on Elm Street movies, stuff from Star Wars and King Kong and Evil Dead, Phantasm 2, Planet of the Apes, and on and on and on. I mean, some of the most iconic movie props you've probably ever seen. And he had this. And so we set them all up and people could come there and walk through and check them all out. And so I spent a lot of time helping my boss set up the museum as well. Not to mention, it allowed me to get up close and personal with all these special effects props again and nerd out on them because oh my God, I was losing my mind. I'm a little teenage kid. I'm getting to hold these special effects props that I saw in these movies that I loved. And now here they are in my hand, And so it was so cool. So that year also, I I still did my yard haunt, but I was also again really focused on continuing to learn things and work in the effects industry and work on movies, and then also work on these other couple Halloween attractions.
Now, your video says that you started in 78, or the early years was 78 to 92. What happened in the early 90s? That you take a break for a bit, or what happened?
Well, so here's what happened. So 1990 was my last year in Whittier, and also probably the biggest year there. That's where we actually got a little media coverage. The newspaper came down. I was on the front page of the newspaper, and it was probably the most elaborate display I had done, and had tons of my own custom props and effects and stuff. That's where I made a lot of the things we were talking about earlier in this video, like the devil dog effect and the toe pincher coffin, body parts and tombstones, and a lot of props from movies and stuff. A lot of it was showing up that year. That was definitely, I think, my most elaborate year that I did. So anyway, it got really big. I'm not even kidding, we had hundreds of people lined up down the street to get in all night long. It was crazy. And we also had one really crazy thing happen there where one of the, back then also, you couldn't just run to a Spirit Halloween and buy a cheap fog machine. Like, the first fog machine I ever bought was a like $300 fog machine from Pro Sound and Stage lighting company that does like professional lighting for, big productions and stuff. You couldn't just go get a cheap little party fogger back then. So when I did that haunt that year in 1990, I actually borrowed what was called a Mo fogger from my boss. And these were what were called oil cracker foggers that they used to use on movie sets back then, that usually they were not very safe at all. They actually used oil and heated up oil and vaporized the oil into a fog that was so dangerous to breathe. But we really didn't have any. It was so bad. So here I am. I have one of these oil cracker foggers hidden in the bushes in my front yard. And the way they worked was so sketchy. They had this giant metal core, and they had a electrical coil that went around the core, and the electrical coil would heat up, turn this core red hot, that would vaporize this oil concentrate, whatever the mixture was, and vaporize it into fog, right? It was ridiculous. And you had a pump on it, and you had to manually pump this pump down on top of it to shoot fog out, right? So my buddy was there working with me at the time. We're all dressed up in costume. We're doing this crazy haunt in my front yard. And every minute or so, he would stick his foot into the bush, push down on the pump on the fogger to send a blast of fog out of the bushes into our haunt. Well, he just got done pumping it with his foot, walked away, and all of a sudden there was this massive explosion. Huge explosion. And all of my bushes were on fire in front of our house. And sure enough, the fog machine was faulty. That heating coil overheated and literally exploded the entire fog machine and lit our bushes on fire. Luckily, we had a hose nearby, and we were able to blast the bushes down and put out the fire. And my parents held the line so that we could deal with this emergency really quick. And we got the fire out, and 5 minutes later, our haunt was up and running again. And thankfully, my buddy didn't lose his foot.
I bet you that got some startles.
Oh man, yeah. That was definitely an unplanned scare. So anyway, crazy. Back on track. So that was year 90. That was definitely my biggest year. So now here we are. I've done about 11 or 12 years now at my house in Whittier, and we've become this go-to house at Halloween time. We've got this really big following. We're getting hundreds and hundreds of people now at our haunt. And all of a sudden, my parents decide to move. So in 91, early 91, we moved to Fullerton, California. And we had a whole new house and a new yard, and I had to completely rethink things. So in 91, and I have years 91 and 92 on that video. Those 2 years, I think, were probably my best years as far as the artwork that I put into my yard. I don't love the yard displays. I think they were like, they look kind of minimal actually, and the lighting was terrible. Like I had nothing good for lighting. So it was really even hard to kind of see everything that I had on display, and it was kind of dispersed in a way where it didn't seem like that much. And I spent so much time on little individual pieces of, artwork that it wasn't as much about quantity. It was more about quality for me. So I would spend all this time making like a really cool zombie prop or something, or some cut off body parts, but I didn't have a lot to put out there. And so even though I really love a lot of the artwork that I put into those yard displays, the displays themselves, just in my opinion, weren't super big and super dynamic. It was still cool. And honestly, it got a crazy amount of attention because nobody in Fullerton at the time had really even seen anything like this, or there weren't a lot of people, again, doing crazy art displays. And so when I showed up in Fullerton and started doing this, the media found out about it. And next thing I knew, it was like 5 or 6 newspapers showed up. The big newspapers too, Orange County Register, Los Angeles Times, and even the local newspapers for the college, Fullerton College, showed up, and it was all over. And so we had some really good crowds of people for those 2 years in 91 and 92. And then in 92 is when I actually moved out on my own. So what happened was I was now, in 92, I'm already 5 years now working in the movie industry, and it was really picking up for me. I was in 91 was my last year at the first shop that I worked at. And now I went out on my own and started shop hopping. So I started bouncing around to all these different effects shops in the industry and working on all these really great movies and getting to be part of all these amazing, special effects and stuff. And it was awesome. I was learning a lot more techniques and meeting a lot more people and networking and stuff. And so I moved out on my own. And when I moved out, I no longer had a place with a yard where I could even do a display anymore. So that was really kind of what stopped it at 92 and why I wasn't able to continue it at that point, because I was really focusing on just really kind of trying to make a name for myself in the effects industry and be successful at that type of work, which is so hard to do. That industry is so competitive. There's so many people. It's so tough to get into these effect shops. And I was doing it. I was just really driven, really goal-oriented, and just was on fire to make this happen. And I networked like crazy and just got myself into all these shops, and it was working. And so I had to ride that wave. And then again, like I said, I no longer even had a yard to do.
Okay, so when did you get back into doing a yard haunt? I take it you bought a home and then you had the place to do it?
So here's what happened, and I'll try to give you the shortest, quickest version of this, because it was about almost a 10-year period before I really started doing haunted attractions again. What happened was, not only was I working solid in the effects industry and working also on theme parks starting in the mid-90s, but I also I had a business partner, a guy that I met at the first effect shop I worked at, my buddy Ron. And this whole time, me and Ron shared the same passions. We were trying to do our thing in the effects industry. We actually opened our own effects shop together. And we both had this goal to open a professional haunted attraction. We wanted to do it so bad. So for the next, 8 years or so, we bounced around this idea of doing a professional haunt. We even had other business partners that we brought in. We were working on all these different ideas. We had really tried our best to make this thing happen. And we just felt like it wasn't going anywhere. And we just needed to do it. It's kind of like that whole thing, just build it and they'll come, And so I got tired of bouncing around to different meetings and trying to pull different people in and trying to get investors involved. And I was just like, Ron, we got to do this ourselves or it's never going to happen. So I literally, in 2001, I took about $2,000 of my own money. I bought a ton of latex, plaster, and all kinds of materials. I was living in a little tiny duplex in Whittier. Again, I had this little tiny place, not much workspace or anything. And I started just making props in my kitchen and in my backyard. And I had a little metal shed, and I just filled this shed with props. And I was like telling Ron, I go, I'm just going to make this stuff for a haunt that we are going to do. And that's the end of it. We're doing this thing. I'm just going to start building stuff. And at first it was really random. It was just kind of a lot of random props that you could just sort of make it work, you know, kind of just generic. We didn't have a really great story at that time or really great direction. We were even thinking of doing kind of like a haunted museum type of thing with a lot of weird different displays, which it just left it really open for us to be able to use anything and everything and make it work. And then what happened was I attended this wedding at this 100-year-old winery and vineyard in Ontario, California. And it was this place called the Guasti Vineyard, Guasti, California. And almost the entire vineyard and the buildings and the bungalows and these old, amazing winery buildings, almost all of it was basically a ghost town at this point. There were a couple buildings that were still being used from businesses, and there was the Guasti Mansion that was still being used for special events like weddings. And this place was amazing. The second we saw this location with all these dilapidated 100-year-old buildings, river rock stone buildings, all these amazing trees and ivy fences, it was the creepiest, most awesome location ever. And we went, we have to do a haunt here. So we contacted the owner of the Guasti property. We found a vacant building there that was used for their marketplace all throughout the early 1900s. And we took it over. And we started our own professional haunted attraction called the Haunted Vineyard. And our first year was 2002. So as soon as we got that location, we knew we had to create a story that worked for this location. There was no way we were going to do like a sci-fi maze or a killer clown maze or something when we're in the middle of this amazing 100-year-old winery and vineyard. So of course, we called it the Haunted Vineyard, and we created this whole backstory that worked for that location. So this was everything I was doing as a kid, everything, my yard displays and learning effects and doing that was all gearing up to this moment. I always knew I wanted to do a professional haunted attraction. It was so important for me to do it. And here we were, 2002, and we just made it happen. I opened up a bunch of credit cards, maxed out our credit cards, and got as much material and supplies as we could. We used everything we already had, whatever props and masks, things from movies. We had, I'm not even kidding, in our haunt, we had costumes from John Carpenter's Ghost of Mars. We had props that I did for Stargate. We had props and costumes and things from different movies, props and set pieces from different theme parks we worked on. And we just had to make do with what we had to get our first year off the ground. And then we custom made almost everything. All the masks were hand sculpted, all of the set pieces and scenery and everything we made, all the props were all our own custom creations. Because again, we wanted it to be so unique and a one-of-a-kind attraction. So that's what we did. And so we ran our haunt from 2002 to 2005, and it was awesome. I mean, people still talk about it today, and it's so great. I'll run into people at the horror conventions and Halloween conventions, and they're like, oh my God, the Haunted Vineyard, that was our favorite haunt ever. And it's so great to get this feedback from people still. And the word of mouth was crazy. We had all these amazing write-ups, and it was skyrocketing. Every year for the 4 years that we ran it, we more than doubled our numbers in attendance. By year 4, it was crazy. I mean, we were at the point where we were almost having to shut down our ticket booth because we couldn't even handle the amount of people that were showing up. And then at the end of 2005, our 4th year running our haunted attraction, a land development company from San Diego came up and bought the entire property, and everybody, all the tenants, got kicked out of this entire place. And so we lost our haunted attraction in 2005. So we only had 4 short years to run our dream job, and we spent, I put everything of myself into this to make this attraction the best it could be. And then to lose it after only 4 years was so devastating. And the worst part about it too is the land developing company came in, had this crazy plan to redo the whole property with offices and retail stores and a community college and all this stuff. And they basically didn't do anything with it. The economy tanked and the entire place just sat there. And what's even worse, what was really heartbreaking is, again, there's not a lot of historical buildings left, especially on the West Coast. There's a lot more on the East Coast, but on the West Coast, it's really hard to find river rock buildings that were built, at the turn of the century in the late 1800s and stuff. And there were all these amazing buildings and these amazing bungalows, and they leveled almost all of those so that they could rebuild there. And then they didn't even rebuild. Luckily, the Upland Historical Society swooped in, and they were able to stop. Them from leveling all of the buildings. They saved a couple of them and moved them to a local park nearby, and a couple of them got tarped and tented and are still sitting there today. In fact, our building that we ran our haunted attraction in, our haunted attraction was about, about 20,000 square feet, maybe more than that. And it was exterior and interior environments. We had cornfields and cemeteries, and then we had all this interior stuff in the marketplace. And that marketplace building was one of the first buildings slated to be demoed and to be leveled. And that building is still standing there today, the building that we ran our haunt in, which is crazy. So you can still see our building, and you could still see the rotten wooden wheelchair ramps that all led up to the doors going into the building. They're all like the skeletons, the rotten wooden skeletons of these wheelchair ramps are still there today. You can even see it in a Google search. If you go on Google Maps, you can literally see our building there with the rotten wheelchair ramps. It's so sad. So
what happened? You took a couple, do you have a few years off? When did Grimwood Hollow start up?
Yeah, so in 2005, that was our final year doing that. And then I was still living in Whittier in that little duplex for quite a few years and couldn't even do a display there at all. And then me and my wife, Nicole, we got married. We moved to Glendale. We went into another triplex where we were the middle unit and we didn't have a yard, so that didn't work. Finally, in about... I'm going to say it was like 2012 or 2013, we moved to Pasadena. We finally got this really cool little old bungalow house in this area called Bungalow Heaven, which is in the middle of Pasadena. And it looks like, I'm not kidding, it looks like it's straight out of like the movie Halloween or something. It's this rad little neighborhood that feels so East Coast. And it just feels like fall when you're in this neighborhood. We were loving it the second we moved there. And so we're like, all right, it's on. We're doing a yard display. And so we started up again in maybe 2013, doing a little yard display in Pasadena. And we were calling it the Wicked Vines. We didn't really put too much thought into it. It was very simple. And we were still kind of trying to tie it in a little bit with the Haunted Vineyard. And so we called it the Wicked Vines. And it was super simple. It was a scarecrow, some tombstones, some webs, jack-o'-lanterns, a couple little decorations here and there. It was very minimal, but it was awesome. And it just got us going again. We're like, all right, we got something going for this year. And now we can keep building on this. And we had a tiny yard. Our yard was really just kind of a sliver of grass across the front of this little bungalow. But whatever, we were using it and we were doing it. So the following year, 2014, I think, we stepped it up. We added a few more props. We built the witch's corpse that is in the coffin where she reaches her arm out at you. I think that I built that in 2014 or 2015, and we added that to our yard.
Now you do sculpt. Is that whole thing sculpted? Is that like a piece that you did sculpt, cast, and do all of that mold and cast, or is that what is she made out of? The
witch.
Yeah, the coffin, right?
Is a build-up sculpture. So it's basically just starting with one of those pose and play skeletons, and then doing a build-up sculpture with latex, paper towels, and cotton, and then manipulating it and sculpting it so you can really create a character with it. It's not just there's a term everyone uses in the haunt industry. They call it corpsing, and there's a lot of different types of corpsing, right? Like you can use latex and paper towels and cotton, but a lot of people even use plastic these days, where you use plastic glad bags or tarps and you hit it with a heat gun, and it can do really cool stuff too. But I wanted to not just cover it in rotten skin. I wanted to build up features of this character and really create kind of a sculpture out of it, which is exactly kind of the same thing I did for the Swamp Witch that we have. That was also a one-off build-up sculpture where you're really taking this material and sculpting with it and building these forms and creating, muscle structures and eyelids and lips and all of these features that really helps sell it as a character, a big wicked witch nose or big pointy witch ears, and really using the material to sculpt with rather than just stretching it around like rotten skin.
Yeah.
And there's definitely areas where we do that too, but yeah, it was all a one-off build-up sculpture.
You're giving it more like of a personality. You're than just trying to make it look dead or decaying. What do you use for the arm mechanism?
So have you ever seen those little puppets? They call them like the punching nuns. Mm-hmm. It's basically like a little hand puppet where you pull a trigger and the hands go out like they're punching. And that's basically it. It's basically a simple mechanism like that I just kind of upgraded with metal parts and PVC. But the idea of it and the way it works is basically the same way those little punching puppets work.
So someone has to stand there and pull, like, or activate it.
That's what we do. I personally, when it comes to scares, and this has always been kind of my belief, at least the way I like to do it, I love to be able to manually control scares because for a couple of reasons. One, I think then you can always get your timing just right with your guests, because sometimes if you just have like a motion sensor, your guests might not even be looking at it and they trip it and it goes off and then you don't get a great effect. So I've always loved just being able to manually trigger our scares so that we can time it just right, not only for the best scare, but also so it's safe. Make sure people's faces aren't right in it when it goes off or when it's being tripped. So when you have something like a witch where she's reaching out, we don't want to like poke someone in the eyes. So that's something that we manually do. And what we have a lever behind it, but we have a rope that goes down to a pulley, and then the rope goes over to wherever we're sitting or wherever we're standing. So we can be 10 feet away from it and actuate it. And people have no idea that we're actually manually doing it. They think they're like tripping a sensor and stuff. In fact, half the time people walk up to it and they start tapping on it or hitting it and waving their hands in front of it and going all crazy, thinking they're going to set it off when it's actually us just pulling a string.
Well, that's the best part about that, like you're saying, is that if you had it on a motion sensor or some other trigger, when a person walks up to it, no matter what, it's going off. So they can keep jumping in front of it and setting it off. Where if they come up and they expect it to go off because it went off on them before, and they're like, wait a minute, and they're poking at it and it doesn't go off and it doesn't, like, the arm doesn't come out, and then they're like, oh, I guess it doesn't work, and then you hit it and the arm comes out and then you get another startle out of them.
That's right. Yeah, because you're right. That's exactly the moments we wait for, is for them to let their guard down. And as soon as they give up on it and let their guard down, you nail them again, and yep, you get a second scare out of it. And it's perfect. And we have, I don't know if you saw last year, we added all of these little miniature pumpkin guys, and there's one of them that pops up out of a box. And that one, I hooked up with a remote control. So that one, we could be anywhere in the yard and we hit a remote control button and then he pops up. So same kind of thing. We can time it just right. We can allow there to be a lot of time in between it where people let their guard down and then nail them again with it. And I find it more fun to have manually operated scares.
It's not a pneumatic driven prop. It's what else? What are you using to make it pop up out of the crate or out of the box?
Those are all wiper motors. I don't have any pneumatics set up right now because I don't have a big air compressor to run all that.
They're really hard. I've been trying to wean myself off of pneumatics because it's like you can only set it up like one night. There's too much noise and too much running and too much that can go wrong as well. Where if I can do a standalone thing, I would prefer to do it. So that mechanism is just like, so you have a little remote, like a little wireless remote trigger. It fires it, and it's like a wiper motor that's just hooked up to like a sticker or a pole that pushes the lid up or pushes the guy up to the lid.
Yeah, it's one of those simple lid opening mechanisms. And then I use, I'm sure you and probably everybody listening knows Fright Props. Fright Props has a lot of great stuff for doing this kind of work. And so I used a lid mechanism that I got from them, and then a prop controller called the Pico Volt. And the reason I wanted to use that one is it allows you to control forward, reverse, and also the speed of the motor. So that way I was able to really control the animation on it, how many times I wanted it to pop up and down, and how fast I wanted it to pop up and down. Because that one, it pops up twice really fast, and then the last time it comes up really slow and stops there. Excuse me. So that everyone can kind of get a good look at the little pumpkin imp creature, and then he goes back down and hides again. So that's why I kind of did that setup. I thought it'd be great to be able to really control the animation on it. Cool. And I just prefer using electric motors for what I'm doing right now. I don't have anything. We don't really have a lot of crazy over the top animations or scares where they really have to be super beefy and robust and, or have to fly out really fast and then fly back really fast. Obviously, with stuff like that, pneumatics are kind of the best setup for that. Electric motors don't always work the best for something like that. But just for simple movements and simple animations, we like using just electric motors or just manually operate it, just a little lever you pull.
Oh, there you go. I've been using a lot of linear actuators lately because again, you could make it stand alone. So I also have a well that I had made a couple of years ago. Mine, I just have like a creepy, swampy looking guy who comes up and he peeks up out of the well and then he peeks back down again. So he just kind of pokes up and then disappears, and that's all just a linear actuator. And,
I love that guy. I saw your video on that. I love that guy. It's so good.
So thanks. Talk about your little pumpkin imp guys and how you put those together.
Well, did you want me to continue from Pasadena and how we got to Grimwood Hollow?
Oh yeah. I don't want to just look. Yeah, any direction you want to go is fine by me.
It'll be quick. All right. So Pasadena. I think our last year in Pasadena was 2016. And we continued doing our little Wicked Vine story. And it was a very specific story we came up with about this witch who, back in like the 1920s, 1930s, this witch who, it was this lady who was attacked by the town. They thought she was a witch and they buried her alive. And so she cursed the whole town, and she trapped like all of the souls of these neighborhood children inside the pumpkins in her pumpkin patch. Okay. So there was this really weird story that we came up with. And that's what the witch is in the coffin. The witch was supposed to be the witch's corpse for that story that we created. Anyway, so now we moved to Burbank. We get this great new location in Burbank. We're kind of in the heart of the San Fernando, which in my opinion is like the heart of home haunters around here. It really is. There are so many home haunters in Burbank and the San Fernando Valley and the surrounding cities. It's crazy how many people go off and decorate. So here we are now in the heart of this, and we're like, all right, that's it. we are going to step it up now. And that's how Grimwood Hollow was born. We decided, let's abandon our kind of weird, convoluted story about this witch that kind of, it kind of gave us these parameters that we always felt we were kind of stuck and confined to, and we couldn't stray from our story too much and get more elaborate and stuff. So what we decided to do was just create this place called Grimwood Hollow. And so we came up with this concept of just this sort of creepy place where you follow the crooked path through these evil woods and you end up at this creepy cemetery called Grimwood Hollow, and anything goes in there. Anything Halloweeny and spooky and whatever you want can happen within Grimwood Hollow. So we just kept it very vague. We wrote that fun little poem that you read that's out in front of our haunt that kind of sets the stage for it and kind of gives you the whole mood and the feel and the vibe of what we're doing. And then that's it. We just started coming up with ideas that we thought would be fun in this environment, in this creepy Grimwood Hollow environment. So 2017 was, I believe, or actually it might have been, I think it was 2018 was our first year running Grimwood Hollow in Burbank. And it was definitely more elaborate than Pasadena. We stepped it up a bunch. We had a much larger yard now, which was great. So we expanded. We added the Swamp Witch. We have a projection in our window. I sculpted all those custom tombstones that were all hand carved and painted that we put out there. And we just created a lot of new theming. We have that whole little area in our driveway. That's kind of the trick or treat area with the witch's corpse. And then we created that whole kind of fun little entry area with the branches, the archway that's supposed to be sort of the entrance to the cemetery where our poem is. And that's kind of, that was kind of the first year of 2018. And then 2019, we wanted to just even add more elaborate stuff. And what we really wanted to do was get more life out of the yard. Like, we had all these really fun static props, but we really loved what the Swamp Witch brought to our yard. It just kind of brought some life to it, some animation, something moving and living that looked creepy, and it was so fun. And that's what we wanted to do. So that was kind of our focus for 2019, was let's get more things that are moving and breathing some creepy life into our yard. So that was why we did the wishing well. We thought the wishing well would be like a really cool centerpiece. And my wife actually came up with the idea of all the little pumpkin imps. She's like, what if the witch conjured up all these little pumpkin imp characters? And we loved it. And so the idea was the witch conjures up all these little pumpkin imps, and then they're just going to cause mischief all over the yard. So they're doing her evil bidding all over the yard. So we had a lot more ideas. And as always, like with every home haunter, you have 100 ideas and you have to scale it down to just a couple that are doable. So what we're going to do, though, is we're going to continue to add some really fun things. We already have some things in the works. There's going to be more happening with the pumpkin imps, and there's going to be more characters showing up, and there's going to be more animation. But we have a whole story there that's kind of unfolding. It's still going to be vague. We can still do a lot of different things in the yard, but the witch is going to be conjuring up more magic, more wicked mischief that'll be happening throughout the yard as we continue to do Grimwood Hollow.
The first time I saw the haunt, I really I love the pumpkin patch type vibe of it.
Thank you.
That you've had. It looks like you have carved pumpkins, and you also have real. So you mix in, you have real pumpkins, and then some foam ones, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And we always carve about, usually around a dozen real jack-o'-lanterns, and then we have dozens and dozens of the fake ones, the foam ones, and the funkins and stuff like that, which are nice because you can use those year after year.
And then you've got the effect, one of the, like, your centerpiece effect, the wishing well. You've got the little pumpkin imp who's cranking the handle, and it kind of pulls like a dead body out of the well, and then it drops it back in. You're using a wiper motor there again.
Yeah, so that was an extremely tricky one. That, to tell you the truth, I'm still kind of working some stuff out with that. The Fright Props controllers and the things that they have they're awesome. I love them. I can't say enough good things about them, but it's not going to be, theme park level motors and controllers and things like that. And so it's great for most of your home haunter applications. I've been in touch with them. I've been communicating with them. And what I'm trying to do with that wishing well, what I did last year, is it's actually a lot more complicated than it looks like. And it's tricky, I guess, to say, to get the accuracy that I need out of that prop. And they even said that like their prop controllers are good if you have kind of like a continual movement or something that's being tripped on a motion sensor. But the type of accuracy I need with this prop, it's not working real great. So I've looked into different options, and I have some ideas of how I'm going to probably rework it, and I'm going to probably put a kill switch in it, because last year I was sweating it. I was really stressing. I stood out there the whole time, and it was almost hard for me to really concentrate on having a good time and the guests and having fun. Of course we did, but I was always had my eyes on that prop, because I was noticing that that prop would start to slip after a while. So it has a very specific animation. It goes up, the body cranks up out of the well, stops at a certain point, then it cranks back down and stops at a certain point. But what was happening is the motor was starting to slip, and all of a sudden it was over rotating. Now, if it over rotates when it goes down, it's not that big of a deal. If it over rotates when it goes up, it can literally pull that body up and over the bar and basically destroy the entire prop, which I didn't want to happen. So I was keeping an eye on it. And luckily, all last year, just pure luck, every time it slipped on the down movement, never on the up movement. So we got lucky, but all that to say, I need to come up with something that's going to have a little bit more accuracy and solid movement that doesn't have the chance of destroying the prop. Then
you don't want to be sweating that all night.
I'd have to run out there in the middle of the show and reset it occasionally, which is a bummer too, because you have all these people around watching, and then you're out there unplugging extension cords, and it's like, oh man, it just kind of ruins the show for everybody.
Wow, I've never had that happen before. What is that like? That's going to be really hectic. When I was doing a little walkthrough in my driveway, I had, because I had a bunch of pneumatics plugged in there and some fog machines, and I had too much going into one outlet, so it kept tripping and blowing the fuse. Now I can't see. I'm like, yelling to the guy out front, hold everybody back, and I'm running down, tripping down the stairs, going into my basement. I can't see anything because all the fuses down there, all the lights are on the same fuse that just blew, and I'm stumbling around trying to find the breaker box with my hand, flip the switch. I had that happen like 3 times one night, and I couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't really fix anything. It was too busy, and I was like running around by myself, and I couldn't tell someone else how to go down there and do it, because I didn't know it was just crazy. I've had all kinds of shit like that happen. Every year something doesn't work that I want to work, because a lot of times I have to set up at the last minute, those pneumatic type props or those things that have the startle effects, because the weather around here in the Northeast are very unpredictable, to say the least. We'll have nor'easters and all kinds of crazy shit hit the day before Halloween. We had rain all the way up until 10 a.m., so I couldn't do anything the night before. It downpoured the night before Halloween going into the day, and luckily it stopped at around 10 a.m. So then I'm dragging the shit out, trying to throw it out there and set it up and troubleshoot it on the fly. It's like I've been in that situation numerous times with that kind of
I think that's just the life of a home haunter, huh?
That is, because you're doing it out in your front yard. There's no consistency on weather and all the other shit. So
we're at the mercy of Mother Nature.
Absolutely.
We're pretty fortunate in Southern California, I gotta say, but we've been getting some gnarly winds in October for sure, and that's been pretty sketchy. Like again, like me and my wife, we only run our haunt for 4 nights out of October. And we only bring like our big props out for that final week when we're going to be running it and stuff, because we are so worried about the weather. I mean, if it rained, there's a lot of stuff that could probably get ruined if it gets rained on. And so we have large, giant plastic Christmas tree bags that we throw over our props to kind of protect them. And again, there's probably, I'm not even kidding, 30 or 40% of our display, we bring it in every single night and then bring it back out to set it up.
Wow.
Like on that final week when we're doing stuff. So it's really, it's kind of labor intensive. And we've been trying to bounce some ideas around of how to make it a little bit easier on ourselves, to set this thing up and to also man it while it's running, to where we can just enjoy it more and not have to be so focused on, making sure things don't go wrong or break down or, whatever, and even make it safer for people. Cause people get excited. They bring their kids are trying to climb on things and touch everything. And the parents are even doing it more than the kids. And so, you're trying to keep an eye on them too. So they're not, getting hurt or destroying stuff that you've worked so hard on. So there's a lot of that as well that we have to constantly kind of stay focused on when we have our yard up and running. And it makes it really difficult to run our haunt for more than a couple nights. So we want to try to really focus on how to make this a little bit easier on us and also a better experience for the guests too.
Okay, Steve, so just explain before we wrap everything up, your pumpkin imps, just the build for those and how you put those together.
You bet. So again, the pumpkin imps were something new we added last year for 2019. Nicole really came up with the idea for those. The witch conjured up these crazy pumpkin imps that are going to cause all this mischief. And so we had to come up with a way to create these. And we decided to make them just small little characters. We thought it'd be a lot more fun. And so we used those standard 36-inch tall little posable skeletons that you could get anywhere. But we wanted to really give them a lot of character with their heads. And so I decided to sculpt custom heads for them so they could have a lot of really cool personality and really be these unique characters. So I actually, I started in ZBrush because I am a digital sculptor as well as a physical traditional sculptor. And so I started in ZBrush, which is a digital sculpting program, and I just used it for some really quick sketches. Sometimes I like to do 3-dimensional sketches. It just helps me to work it out quicker. Came up with a number of designs. We kind of picked the one we liked, and then I just jumped right into clay and started sculpting the head out of clay. And I'll kind of go through this really quick. I have a really great in-depth video on YouTube you can check out that has the whole making of the imps if you really want to see the whole process. But the short version of it is I sculpted the head out of clay, made a silicone mold on that, and then casted them all out of urethane plastic and a rigid foam. So they were these nice, lightweight, but rigid plastic heads that then we could paint up. And just painted them with acrylic paints, sealed them with a clear sealer. And I thought it'd be really cool to use actual pumpkin stems on them to really give them some unique personality, because every pumpkin stem is different. Glued them and then blended them in with Bondo on the top of the head and painted them in. And that's kind of how the heads were created. And then we popped the skull off of the little skeletons and attach the pumpkin imp heads. And then just wanted to give the bodies a little bit of a rotted skin, rotted pumpkin gut look to the bodies. So the bodies have, the skeleton bodies, we added a little bit of latex and creepy cloth, cheesecloth, and cotton and stuff like that to kind of just stretch it around here and there on the skeletons to give them a little more organic, rotten pumpkin look, and then painted those up, did a wash on them. All of the joints, though, on the standing one by the Witch's Cauldron, I cut apart all the joints and replaced it all with an armature wire. So drilled some holes, epoxied armature wire in there, and that way they could be like a big bendy doll. So, because some of them we weren't sure exactly how we were going to pose them and stage them. And this kind of gives you the freedom to bend them into any pose that you want. You can point the head any direction you want, give them some really cool personality once you stage the whole scene. So that was cool. The pumpkin imp that pops out of the box, he was just a half body. So he's mounted permanently to the lid, and then his arms are mounted in a permanent position so they can't flop around and get caught or on anything when it pops out of the lid. So he's just kind of a half body one made exactly the same way that's mounted to the lid. Now, the one on the wishing well was a little bit more tricky because when he's turning the crank to bring the little drowned corpse up and down, his shoulders and his elbows had to be articulated so they could, move with the motion of the crank. The crank is obviously driven by a motor, and the crank drives the little pumpkin imp. The pumpkin imp obviously isn't turning the crank. He's just along for the ride, and it makes it look like he's turning the crank. So he's just kind of a loose puppet attached to the crank. And so the joints are just simple. I think I just drilled some holes and put zip ties through there and just left it really loose so they could flop around, pose the hands around the crank and attach them. The body is the torso is actually mounted to the seat, and he's mounted on a hinge. So as he's cranking, he can actually rock forward and backward with the cranking motion too. And then the legs are completely separate, and they're just mounted permanently to the seat. And that's kind of how he works. He just goes along for the ride with that cranking motion. And yeah, so that's kind of the real quick version of how we made the little pumpkin imps. And we have some fun new ones that are going to be showing up, causing more mischief and mayhem throughout the yard too. So hopefully everything will be back to normal in this world. Yeah, please, 2021. Let's hope for a better year for everybody. Yeah. And we really hope that Grimwood Hollow will be back bigger and better than ever.
Now, one last thing. I noticed that you have like a bunch of flyers that you have you have a Share Your Scare contest that you do with prizes. And then you also, looks like you have some flyers for like a haunt list flyer. And I take it those are for the local area people that you all, what do you guys all promote each other or have each other on flyers or on a list?
Yeah, so there's a really great haunt community in Southern California. There's a number of different organizations, Cal Haunts, and also the SoCal Valley Haunters. A guy that we know, Derek, started that. So we're part of SoCal Valley Haunters, and we get on their haunt list. I think pretty much anybody who wants to be a part of it, you can early on in the year submit all your information about your haunted attraction to SoCal Valley Haunters. And then Derek compiles this list of all these local home haunts that are happening in the area. And he categorizes them, whether they're walkthroughs or if it's just a display or if it's actually a show. He'll compile them into these categories. And then he actually prints out these beautiful flyers that have all this information on it. And he also has a website with a massive haunt list as well. But then what he does is anybody that's interested in passing out these flyers, he literally hand delivers boxes of these flyers to home haunters. And then we put them on display at our haunted attraction. That way, when people show up at our yard, they can grab a flyer, and it's basically a menu to all the other haunts in the area that they can go check out and make like a whole night out of it or do it whenever. So last year, since, Derek being such a great person to put out these amazing flyers for everybody and hand them out, we wanted to make a really special display for his flyers. And so that's really kind of what also sparked the idea of our little pop-up box imp, was we put this flyer holder out there that people are going to reach for to grab a flyer. And right as they reach for the flyer, the imp comes flying out of the box and scares the heck out of people. And so it actually worked really great because it kind of draws you into it to grab your flyer and to see what it is. And then right as they're paying attention to those flyers, we nail them with the little imp scare. So that's kind of what inspired that whole thing. But yeah, and then the other thing you mentioned was just we had just a little contest last year that I think a lot of people just honestly didn't even see it or pay attention to it. But it was sitting on our trick or treat table. We had a little a little poster set up there that was kind of an Instagram thing where if you videotaped or took some photos at our haunt and shared it on Instagram, we put you into a drawing for a prize package that we gave away and stuff. So that's kind of what that was. It was just, it was a fun way to get people to share their videos and their photos, because honestly, we've had a really hard time getting great photos and video of our haunt and capturing it in like its true lighting and the way it's meant to be seen. I am not a great photographer. I can make some really fun, cool, creepy stuff, but I'm not great at taking photos.
Did somebody shoot the video for you?
A lot of the best video that you've seen in our videos on YouTube actually came from other people. Some of the better photos and better video that we have came from other people. So that's kind of why we got that idea for that little contest, was that maybe it would encourage people to even share their photos and videos with us so that we can get some better images of our haunt and better video of our haunt. And at the same time, say thank you with a little prize package and stuff. So that was kind of the idea behind that. I did get a better camera last year. Our biggest video on YouTube right now, we're still pretty new on YouTube. It hasn't really picked up a lot of momentum yet. We're getting some subscribers now and getting some views, but still we're kind of new on YouTube, and I don't do a lot of social media stuff and everything, so I'm not great, I guess, at promoting our YouTube channel. But if you go on there and you check out our YouTube channel, we have a video from 2019 that is the twilight tour of our entire yard. And it starts off when it's still a little bit light out, and then it gets kind of darker throughout the video. And I think that's kind of the best representation we've gotten so far of our attraction. And I shot that on a brand new camera that I bought last year. And it's a great camera, but it's still not really good in really low light. So that's why I kind of still had to shoot that video during the twilight hours when there was still just enough light to where the camera was still capturing good footage. And that video, I think it's almost up to 5,000 views now. It's I think our biggest video we have on our channel. And that one definitely has the best footage, I think, of Grimwood Hollow so far.
Great. So your YouTube channel is
Grimwood Hollow. That's it.
And for other social media, you really don't do a lot. So,
well, my wife does. She handles. We have a Facebook page, and we do have an Instagram account. It's not super active. If we have something new to post or whatever, she'll do some stuff on there, like a new video coming up or something like that. But yeah, if you go on YouTube, do a search, you can find our channel, Grimwood Hollow. It has Grimwood Hollow videos, and I've been putting a bunch of videos of the Haunted Vineyard, because I had a ton of video that I shot from my professional haunt, the Haunted Vineyard, and I thought it'd be fun to share that with everybody who never got a chance to experience the Haunted Vineyard. I did a 1 hour short film all about what you would have experienced at the Haunted Vineyard from the second you drove up and you drove through this old creepy ghost town to buying your tickets, to going through our midway, and then the entire walkthrough of our haunted attraction. It's a 1 hour film that I did. It took me 7 months to edit it, and it shows you everything about the Haunted Vineyard if you're interested. And then I've also started to post my behind the scenes personal video footage of a lot of my special effects work for a lot of the movies I worked on. I'm working on one right now for all of the guns and weapons, the flashy things, the neuralizers, and all the really cool iconic props that we did for Men in Black. So I'm working on a really cool video right now that actually has some secrets in it that nobody has seen or really knows about the weapons from Men in Black. And it's even going to include a tutorial on how to make those special secret things that are going to be in this video. So if that's the kind of stuff that interests you too, if you love special effects stuff, behind the scenes, haunted attractions, and you want to check out our yard display, Grimwood Hollow, just go to our Grimwood Hollow channel on YouTube and you can check it all out.
All right, Steve. Well, unfortunately, you're not doing your haunt this year, so we'll have to wait for 2021 to catch the updates and catch Grimwood Hollow in full effect once again. And we'll keep our eye open for the other videos on your channel as they start to pop up. And I look forward to that. So anyway, man, it has been a splendid, absolutely a total, as I say, pleasure. A pleasure over here on this side of the table mostly. No, it's been fantastic to talk to you.
You too, Chris. Thanks again for having us on and for giving us this time to talk about our haunt and letting me babble on and on and on and reminisce about the good old days of Halloween and nerd out with you about where we started off. And you know, it's always fun. I can talk forever about this stuff, as you've just seen. So
really?
Thanks for allowing me to do it, and it was a blast, man.
All right, man. Well, happy Halloween.
And you too, bud. Take care.
I'm going now. Heaven help you.
Please like and follow the podcast. Stalk us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Links in the description. And help us by sharing Hauntcast with all your haunted Halloween brethren. Until next time, stay scary.